Every election cycle, you hear the same thing. We just need better leaders, more honest people, someone with real integrity in that office. Different party, different promises, different faces on the pile of campaign posters on the street corner. Same results. At some point, you have to ask the obvious question. Maybe it's not the people. Maybe it's the system they're walking into. Because here's what nobody wants to say out loud. A system that depends on every person who moves through it choosing to do the right thing is not a system. It's a hope strategy. And hope is not a governance plan. Episode 2. The Guardrails of Governance. The permanent structural protections that stop corruption before it starts. Because strong systems don't rely on good intentions. They rely on good design. Let's get into it. Winning a Senate seat cost around $600,000 in 1990. Today, it costs over $20 million on average. That money comes from somewhere, and the people it comes from have expectations. Not always explicit corruption, often something quieter. Access. The assumption that their interests get considered first. That's not democracy. That's a subscription service. And the subscription fee has been going up every single election cycle for 35 years. The revolving door is real and it's documented. A public official spends years regulating an industry, then leaves office and gets hired by that same industry at 3 times the salary. There are nominal rules against this. The nominal rules don't work. Because the people enforcing them are the same people who will eventually want to walk through that door themselves. None of this required a villain. None of it required a conspiracy. It accumulated, one loophole at a time, one precedent at a time, each decision seeming reasonable in the moment. The cumulative result? A system that serves the people operating it far more reliably than the people it was supposed to serve. That is a design problem, and design problems need design solutions. History gives us the warning over and over again. Revolutions are extraordinarily good at removing the people currently holding power. They are extraordinarily bad at changing the structure that concentrated power in the first place. You remove one set of elites, the structural vacuum gets filled by another. Different faces, same incentives, same drift, sometimes faster. France, Mexico, China, Russia, the Arab Spring. Different flags, different enemies, different promised outcomes. Same result every time. But here's the one most people never think about. Germany, 1919. The Kaiser fell at the end of World War I. A democratic republic was established. The Weimar Republic. Genuine elections. Genuine parliamentary democracy. A genuine attempt to build something new on the ruins of the old order. But the structural conditions, crushing war debt, hyperinflation, no strong democratic institutional tradition, extremist factions on both left and right willing to use street violence, created a vacuum of stability that the democratic center couldn't fill. 14 years after the Kaiser fell, Hitler was chancellor. Not through a military coup, not through revolution, through the ballot. Democracy dismantled through democratic process by people who understood that guardrails were the only thing standing between them and permanent power. So, they removed the guardrails first. The lesson isn't that democracy is fragile. The lesson is that democracy without structural guardrails, without institutions strong enough to survive economic crisis and political extremism, can be voted away by the very people it was supposed to protect. That's not ancient history. That's a blueprint that gets used every time the guardrails are missing. A guardrail on the highway doesn't work because drivers choose to respect it. It works because it's physically in the path of the worst outcomes. The driver who loses control doesn't need to make a good decision for the guardrail to do its job. It does its job regardless. That's the model. Not more rules that depend on good faith enforcement by the people the rules are supposed to constrain. Structural features built into the system itself, working automatically, whether or not the people inside the system want them to or not. This redesigned system builds 4 guardrails into the architecture. Not suggestions, not guidelines, not subject to the next election. Structural, permanent, automatic. Guardrail 1. Your rights can't be voted away. Fundamental rights come off the negotiating table, permanently. No majority vote, no executive order, no court reinterpretation. They become constitutional constants, below the system, not inside it, where no instrument of the system can reach them. Guardrail 2. Every dollar of public money is visible. Every contract, every expenditure, every budget allocation, available to any citizen in real time. Not annual summary reports nobody reads. Actual transaction level data. You want to know what your tax dollars paid for last Tuesday? You can look it up. No more speed bumps approved while the road underneath them stays potholed. No more line items checked as completed when the problem wasn't solved. The spending is visible. The accountability is automatic. The People's Chamber is watching in real time and publishing what it finds. Guardrail 3. Money out. Revolving door closed. For real this time. Corporate money constitutionally removed from electoral processes. Individual donations only. Capped at $1,000 per candidate. No corporations, no PACs, no backdoor organizations laundering money into campaigns. A mandatory 10-year cooling off period before any public official can work for the industries they regulated. Public service is service, not a resume builder for a more profitable second act. A candidate who needs to raise a meaningful campaign fund at $1,000 a donor has to actually talk to a lot of people, has to show up in neighborhoods, has to make the case directly to regular people. The cap puts candidates back where they belong, on the ground, in the community, accountable to the people who actually live there. Guardrail 4. Emergencies end. The powers end with them. The Patriot Act was passed 45 days after September 11th as an emergency measure. Significant portions are still in effect over 20 years later. That is not an emergency measure. That is a permanent expansion of government authority that used an emergency as the entry point. This guardrail installs automatic expiration on all emergency power declarations. When the emergency ends, the powers end. Automatically. No vote required. No political negotiation about which emergency powers are convenient to keep. No crisis becomes a permanent expansion of control. Not this time. The clock resets. Every time. Without exception. The difference between a principle and a guardrail is enforcement. And enforcement has to be built in, not dependent on the people being held accountable, deciding to hold themselves accountable. That's the part every previous reform effort missed. You cannot write a rule and trust the people the rule constrains to enforce it against themselves. You build the guardrail, physical, structural, automatic, in the path of the worst outcomes, so that when control slips, and control always slips eventually, the guardrail does its job regardless of who's driving and regardless of what they decide. A hope strategy is not a governance plan. The people who built Weimar, Germany, hoped the democratic institutions would hold. The institutions didn't hold because hope isn't a structural feature. The guardrails are. Episode 3 is next. The participation reset. How citizens go from spectators to actual participants, built into the system itself. Not through protest, through structure. Full episode 2 is on Substack. Everything is in Searchlight Archive. I'm Ryan. Echoes of the Cosmos. The system wasn't broken by accident, and it won't be fixed by accident. I'll see you in episode 3.